Oh, come in, come in. Hi. Nice to see you again. Look, I thought it might be fun. Come over here. Remember last time I showed you I was exploring this secretary, as it used to be called, this kind of desk, because I was reading the beginning of Fantastis. And you remember in this little cupboard, I found these completely forgotten manuscripts, almost exactly as, in fact, Anodos, the hero of Fantastis, finds the manuscripts. Have a seat. Finds the manuscripts. You see, I've got this lovely little Jason Patrick pipe I showed you last time. It's smoking really sweetly now. Anyway, we'll just close the door. So, I think I told you then that amongst the papers, I'd found, rather remarkably, the manuscript, or as it turns out, only partial part of the manuscript of a kind of poem about Narnia I'd written, and I'd actually almost completely forgotten I did it. But once I saw the manuscript, I thought about it, and I thought, yes, I do remember. So I can recall a little bit more about it now. It was at least, well, it was over 40 years ago. It was 1982, I think, or possibly 83. I was a newly qualified English teacher, a young man, and I was teaching in a high school, you know, just a state high school, or what we call a comprehensive school, and I was very idealistically thinking that if I set a task or a homework, as I was supposed to do, you know, for my classes, that I would do it too. I didn't want them, children, ever to feel that I'd set them something unworthy of an adult to do as well, and that if I expected them to show me the results of their homework, then they ought reasonably to expect the same of me, and it would be a cooperative venture. I was trying to get across the idea that learning is a partnership. It's a kind of lifetime thing. I was also, of course, looking for an excuse to do some creative writing. So I think I must have asked them, because we were reading The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe together. I said, well, of course, we're told at the end of the book that this was the golden age of Narnia. And, of course, many, many centuries go on beyond it. In fact, when the children show up again in Prince Caspian, it's so long ago that Lewis specifically says, in the one mention of King Arthur in the whole Narniad, he says, for them, when at the last dire moment, you know, the children reappear in Narnia, it was as though King Arthur had come back. And Lewis says, as some people say he will, and Lewis says, and I say the sooner the better. It's wonderful. So I think I asked them to imagine that they were poets of a much later age, looking back on this golden age in Narnia and telling the dramatic story of the defeat of the White Witch and everything. And just say, I think I probably said, just pick one thing that you want to write about as though you were a poet looking back at it. And, you know, you can write it in any kind of poetry you like. And so I thought, well, I'd better have a go. But, of course, I being young and foolish, I got carried away, and it ended up as quite a long thing, although sadly never finished. I looked, in fact, I found a manuscript book as well as the typist. So in this manuscript book, I've got the plan of the whole poem. Look at this, it's in 9 cantos. And canto 1 is the proem, the little prologue poem setting the scene, and then there's Lucy meets Mr. T, the Queen and Edmund, and so on. I have found either type or manuscript in this book up to about five and a bit cantos. So I got about halfway through it. And why did I not finish it? Well, almost certainly because I was in my first qualifying year as a teacher, and it was just hugely demanding, and you know, endless work. I was also, you know, if this was say 82 or maybe even into 83, I was getting ready to get married. I just put it aside. But anyway, you asked me. You were in touch since you last visited, and you asked me if I'd read a bit of it to you. So I thought, well, why not? You know, it would be fun. So the shortest full section, the first canto, isn't really a long canto at all. It's I think in my plan, I called it the proem. It's a little prelude. Well, just to set the scene a bit, of course, once you've read the whole Narniad, you have the advantage of knowing the entire origin story, who the White Witch really was. You see the first day of creation, and you have the marvellous story in The Magician's Nephew, Diggory bringing the apple from the garden in the west and planting the tree. And of course, for the Narnians at the time that such a Narnian poem might be written, the story of that first day of creation and of the planting of the tree is for them like the book of Genesis. It's right back in primeval history, and indeed our origin story also involves a tree. And then, as I say, the events of the Golden Age, if the one part was distant as the next event that the poet's recording, would be like as distant as King Arthur is to us now. So I tried to get a sense of that in this opening. And I'll just put the pipe down for a minute. And anyway, it's written in quite sort of trotting along. It's the only poem I think I've ever written in rhyming couplets. It's not normally a form I use. And it's 4 stresses to the line. It's called iambic tetrameter, so it's quite shorter than the usual 5-stress line. Anyway, the whole poem is called The Lay of the Great Spring, and this is Canto 1. And I think we've probably just about got time for it in a little visit. There's a little taster. There is more, but we'll see whether it's worth telling or not. So, this is the opening of a kind of Narnian epic, looking back, perhaps 1,000 years after the events that are described in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, but looking even further back to the events that are described in The Magician's Nephew. Lo, I will tell the ancient tale and strike my harp with fingers frail, the ancient tale of winter cold that was before the age of gold, when Peter came the crown to hold and Aslan wrought his deeds of old. That was a time of dreadful woe. All Narnia lay in ice and snow, and bitter frosts benumbed the ground, for winter lasted all year round, and stream and river, pond and well were frozen by a wicked spell. Then bears and badgers, moles and mice found frugal fare. Then cruel ice sealed off the pools and banks and meres. That was a time of grief and tears. Who was it cast that wicked spell? All Narnia knew it all too well. It was the witch queen, leprous white, whose heart was black and bleak as night, whose glance the bravest might appall. 'Twas she who held the land in thrall, a snivelling sorceress low and mean, who dared to call herself a queen. Where she came from, no one knew, though it was whispered by a few that from another world she fled, where she had been by giants bred. That dead world and its dying son she had herself, they say, undone, with awful word in evil hour, by blast of breath and spell of power, and sought another, where her breath might spawn and spread the curse of death. Before the first fawn danced in glade, before the first dwarf dug with spade, before the first of beasts first spoke with the first laugh and the first joke, down from the outer darkness hurled, shrieking, she fell into our world. Her black breath blasted leaf and blade, the very day our world was made. Yet from the first she was disgraced and struck with iron in lantern waste. And that, so runs the sacred rhyme, was in the very depths of time, the time when all the world was young, the very day that Aslan sung. In that time she was forced to flee and rout before Lord Diggory, he who achieved the lion's quest and brought through terror, trial and test the golden apples of the west. And Aslan bade him plant the tree, and spoke the promise fair and free, that ever as that tree should stand, it should protect the new-made land. For that same tree, so strange and rich, was death and horror to the witch. And so she fled in fear and haste to exile in the northern waste, and, left in Frank and Helen's care, the world was happy, free and fair. But that was in the dawn of days. and beasts forgot and changed their ways, forgot the promise and the threat, forgot that they should not forget. But still their lives were strong and free, till they forgot to tend the tree. Its branches drooped, its blossom paled, the line of Frank and Helen failed. The very stones of Narnia cried the day our tree of freedom died. And then she came, with icy breath, to bring us slavery and death. She came on black and bitter nights, with wolves and ghouls and wicked sprites. Then the stout-hearted made a stand, lest evil should possess the land. Bears and badgers, baying hounds, made brief and glorious battle sound. Many brave mice and true of heart were blasted by her wicked art. For truest courage, fierce and fell, was countered by a deadly spell. She turned the best of us to stone, and made our precious land her own. And so she ruled, by blast and blade, the winter desert she had made. Counsel she kept with fiends accursed, but Captain Malgrim was the worst, a hideous wolf both swift and strong, whose horrid deeds are famed in song. Shadow of menace, grey and grim, all Narnia grew afraid of him. Her troops were strong, their watch was sure, but still she did not reign secure, for still she watched the ancient wood for trace of Adam's flesh and blood. A double watch and spies she placed about the woods of Lantern Waste. By Lantern Waste, where wrought and curled of iron from another world, through bleakest storm and blackest night, the lantern shed unearthly light. There, from the first of days it stood, planted by Adam's flesh and blood. And when she saw it shining clear, she shook with hatred, rage, and fear. For by her spells and sorcery, she too had heard the prophecy, whispered deep within the wood, treasured, but scarcely understood. In secret lairs by holt and hill, a secret hope was burning still, a secret shared by beasts and birds, those ancient and mysterious words, when Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. And that's the end of that first poem, ending, of course, with those words, the rhymed words that are directly quoted by the beavers to the children. And I think it was probably from those words that I got the idea of the tone and metre of the whole poem. So the poem finishes with that prophecy, and that's the little prologue. And then there are various cantos telling the story. It was an interesting challenge, actually, because I realised that the Narnians would only have access to the Narnian side of the story. They wouldn't know what we know in the books about what happened in our world, because for them our world is a mysterious, almost unthinkable, unimaginable other place. They call it Spare and Wardrobe, and it's a place of mythology for them. Indeed, later in the poem I riff on the fact that one of the books on Tumnus's shelf is Man a Myth, and so we have a sort of they're sceptical about whether we exist, just as some people are quite wrongly sceptical about whether they exist. Anyway, I thought you'd like a little taste of it. This is a nice drop of an Aaron single malt called Robert Burns, which my friends Ivan and Julie sent me, which was great fun. Anyway, I thought I'd give you a little taste of that, and I hope you enjoyed it. Cheers.